What is an ekphrasis? An ekphrasis is a vivid description of a scene or work of art that is presented in a poem by the narrator. In these literary works, the narrator typically reflects on the painting, which allows him to expand on its meaning. The goal of this literary form is to make the reader envision the art that is being described as if it were physically present. The narrator is able to place himself in the world of the art to enhance the description using literary devices such as vivid imagery, metaphors, personifications, and dramatic monologue or dialogue. The word ekphrasis derives from ancient Greece, where ek means out and phrases means to speak. The ekphrasis is considered to be one of the oldest forms of writing about a work of art in the West. It was created by the Greeks in order to make the reader envision everything being described in the painting. For example, the Iliad by Homer is said to be the earliest use of the ekphrasis, creating a trend. In the passage, there is a description of the shield made by Hephaestus given to Achilles by his mother. In his elaborate details, he includes descriptions of the metal on the surface, mentioning constellations, pastures, dancing, and cities. The passage compares verbal and visual means of description through elements that cannot physically be part of a shield, such as movement and sound. This use of the ekphrasis emphasizes the limitations of the visual. During the second half of the 18th century, Victorian writers created a new context for the ekphrasis. The goal of these new vivid descriptions was to make the reader feel as if they are participating in the visual experience. The more convincing this was, the more effective people considered the writing to be. In recent decades, the term has become more specific, defining it as a visual description to the work of art. The importance of ekphrastic writing in modern poetry has significantly reduced because modern writers who focus on art do not have the same number of readers. The ability to reproduce works of art into ekphrastic writing has decreased because in the 20th century, many ekphrastic poems concern actual art rather than imaginary works of art. Some ekphrastic poems may describe famous art photographs and works, family photographs, and possibly obscure paintings. While artists choose to write about these works, they have to consider the advantages and disadvantages behind them. For example, in many family photographs and obscure paintings, it may be difficult to deliver the appropriate commentary that is needed for the narrator to deliver a sound message. And because of this, it may also be hard to develop an author's purpose because only a small part of the author's feelings are present for the reader. Also, using an obscure painting gives the author a disadvantage because without the original well-known image, it may convey an inaccurate interpretation leading to a false description of what is happening in the picture. But in some ways, an ekphrastic poem can provide new aspects for the work of art. For example, the poem may focus around the minute details in a picture that many may not notice. Through time, scholars have taken the ekphrasis in as a part of their study in literature. For instance, in many literary works, authors put their focus on similar stories that derive from ancient Greek literature. Because of this, it allows the reader to gain an understanding that will give them a connection to the ekphrasis. Although the ekphrasis was not used often in writing during the 18th and 19th century, many authors began to realize the potential of paintings and created commentary to either describe the setting or the believed thoughts of the characters in the image. The Girl with the Pearl Earring is a painting by Johannes Vermeer and is also a novel written by Tracy Chevalier, which was inspired by the famous 17th century painting. The novel was written about a 16-year-old girl named Gret who had to go out and find work as a maid because of her father's illness, but feared she'd be compared to the other maids who earned horrible reputation. Ekphrastic writing and poetry connects the reader to art in many ways, such as giving background on the painting or a descriptive account of what may be the thoughts surrounding the artwork. An example of this is The Virgin Punishing the Infant by Carol Ann Duffy. This poem stems from the Max Ernst Virgin spanking the Christ child before 3 witnesses. In the painting, naked Christ lays across his mother's lap, receiving a spanking from Mother Mary. There is a trio of witnesses, observing with a look of disinterest and scorn. Duffy takes on this odd perspective in her poem to show how some may perceive certain situations in a different light. The main witness in the poem begins to describe how the village began to see Mary struggle with her unique son. As she says in line 9, "After he walked, our normal children crawled." But it also is an example of how people in society may voice their opinions with such harsh judgment in situations that do not concern them. So why is an ekphrasis important? Ekphrastic writing is used in many sets of literature from prose to poetry, all allowing the reader to form a connection with the work of art that inspired the author to create it. There are many different perspectives behind what an ekphrasis really is, but it's just simply an author describing another visual art piece.
created using Powtoon.